Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and for joining us on World Bee Day. We have an amazing community here ready to just dive into all things Bee Lab, B Corp, and bees. So joining us today, I'm Valerie from Banyan Botanicals, and we also have on our call
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Douglas. I work for Banyan Botanicals, and I'm Banyan's Social and Environmental Responsibility Manager, aka Banyan's beekeeper that manages our B Corp certification. And Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sarah Red Laird, and I'm the Executive Program Director for the Bee Girl organization. Currently in Ashland, Oregon, which is where we're based, but we work here in the Rogue and Illinois valleys and up in the Willamette Valley here in Oregon, and then all the way across the Great Basin and the Great Plains through Washington and Montana and South Dakota on all sorts of cool habitat projects that we'll be sharing about.
Hi, all. I'm Tommy, the farm manager here at Banyan Farm in lovely Williams, Oregon. Super pleased to take a break from my morning harvesting vegetables to talk about the importance of bees in agriculture.
Awesome. And I forgot to mention, Banyan Botanicals is headquartered in Ashland, Oregon, right next to Bee Girl. In fact, one of our first meetings, we met in the Banyan Garden, and she just walked across the street. So pretty great and wonderful communities here in Southern Oregon. Lots of B Corps in Oregon, too. Shout out for Oregon B Corp.
Beautiful. Erin, now could you share with us a little bit about the Banyan Botanicals journey to become a B Corp?
Yeah,
How long have we been a B Corp?
Sure. Yes. So, in fact, gosh, this is so funny. I have this picture. I don't know if y'all can see it, but this is me and our CEO, Kevin Casey, celebrating our B Corp certification. We first became certified in 2019, but we started our journey many years before that. I'd say 2.5 years going through the B Corp assessment. It's incredibly rigorous. More than 200 questions, and it really proves that a company is committed to social and environmental responsibility and using their business as a force for good. So the B Corp tagline is businesses using a business for a force for good, and we love that. There's a term called the triple bottom line, which really means measuring people, planet, and profits. And I'd say that's what B Corps do really well. Makes them different than a nonprofit because we are a for-profit, and fiscal responsibility is also important so we can pay our people and do the good things that we do in the world. And on top of being a social and environmental responsible company, Banyan Botanicals, the mission of Banyan is to help people achieve and maintain health and well-being through the wisdom of Ayurveda. So Banyan is a botanical supplements company, and we're organic, fair trade, and we're certified B Corp. So we're doing a lot of good things. And years ago, I heard about B Corp certification, and I said, I want to work for a B Corp. I've now been at Banyan 10 years, and part of my journey has been wearing many hats, but I was the beekeeper, and I presented the plan to go through B Corp certification. And our amazing CEO, Kevin Casey, has so much integrity. Yeah, we really took our time making sure that when we answered our questions, we really did the work. We anchored all of any new policies and practices into our DNA even further. And so, yeah, we certified in 2019, and we're just about to finish probably this week or next our recertification, which has also been incredibly rigorous. But we've improved our score by 20 points, which is pretty amazing. So we love the B Corp community, and just so stoked to be on this call with y'all today. And thanks, B Lab, for having us.
Big love to B Lab. Okay, so Erin, you mentioned a little bit about the fact that we're neighbors with B Girl at the Banyan Farm in Williams. So we're curious to know a little bit about how the whole partnership got started and what that partnership looks like too.
Yeah, I'll get us started, Sarah, and then I'll hand it over to you. Well, I've always been a mega fan of Sarah's since the first day I learned about her work. In fact, Sarah, I took a farm tour right when I moved to Oregon about 10 years ago, maybe it was 9 years ago now. And Sarah was the moderator on the bus.
As the MC with the mic.
The MC on the bus. It was organized through our Ashland Food Co-op, and we stopped and visited all these different farms, and Sarah was the MC. It was so fun. So that was my first intro to Sarah. Then I started going to all of her fundraisers and with friends, and she can throw a great party. So I've been to at least 3 or 4 of her annual fundraisers. And as it turns out, Kevin Casey and a few people on our team, his wife and a few other folks on our team, were playing around with beekeeping, and Sarah was advising, and so we had all these different connection points. But it was really what this just recently when we made one of the great things about B Corp is we're inspired to keep improving. And one of the things we did in the last 3 years was we drafted our commitments to the environment and really our commitment to protect and build biodiversity. And with that clear commitment, it was easy for me to see an opportunity to engage with Sarah, really like-minded. She's really passionate about regenerative agriculture on top of her bee work. And so similar values really brought us together. And like I said, I think our first meeting was on Zoom because of COVID, but soon later we were meeting in the garden. And it's just so cool that she's local, but also doing national work is so important. And it was just like, heck yes, we should have been doing this a long time ago, but here we are. Yeah, Sarah, I'll pass it off to you, and then maybe we could just talk a little bit about our partnership.
Yeah, BGO has been going for about 13 years now, and I don't remember a time where I don't remember you or Banyan Botanicals. I also grew up in Ashland, and so it seems like Banyan has just been around forever and is a super trusted, very conscious company. I've used Banyan Botanical products for a very long time. Even when I was living up in Alaska, I was using your like many years ago. I would have your Triphala shipped up to me from my mom, and I currently take your supplements to get my ashwagandha in, and now there's even a new line of honey. There's a elderberry honey and a turmeric honey. So I usually make my own honey concoctions for health, and I don't have to do that anymore because now I have Banyan products.
Awesome.
So yeah, when Erin originally reached out and mentioned that they were going through B Corp certification and they wanted to figure out a way to partner, it was a no-brainer. We were definitely going to create some room on the plate to be able to partner with Banyan, and we didn't know what that looked like at first, if it would just be a cause marketing campaign. But then the more we talked, the more we realized that really what the Bee Girl organization offers would be really well suited for a partnership on the farm. And because there is a organic farm that grows vegetables for a community, as well as herbs for the Banyan Botanical supplements. And so doing a project together where we could explore, monitor, better understand your bee communities on the farm so you can share that with your community of consumers, as well as working almost in a consultant role and working shoulder to shoulder with Tommy to find little places on the farm that could be improved for bees over the next few years. So yeah, that's how the arc of the relationship from my side.
I'd love to hear too more about the that relationship between the farmers and the farm and the bees. Can we speak to that, Tommy and Sarah?
Sure. Well, just to start by saying, for years I've been a bona fide plant nerd, just obsessed with plants and working with them, studying them, and Sarah has turned me into a bee and insect nerd as well. Just been such a joy to be out in the field, just looking at bees with Sarah. And now a couple times a week I crack my bee identification book and Yeah, it's just been so fun to get into. There's just so much on the farm, which is easy to miss. That yeah, it takes a really special eye to tune into it, and yeah, it's just so fun starting to develop that eye, just seeing all this vibrant insect life that's right underneath our noses, and um, yeah, it's just been a really fun relationship so far. Um, yeah, I think just to speak to some of the importance of yeah, why this relationship has felt so important. I mean, one of them is like obviously the most basic is that we rely so much on bees for pollination. Yeah, the apples, peaches, pears, zucchini, cucumbers, just a few of the many foods they grow here that they really rely on the presence of bees to create that food. Yeah, relies on a bee to just notice these beautiful flowers, which many of which are in bloom right now, and collect pollen from a flower and bring it to another. So I'm not the only one out here working to grow food. The bees are doing a huge amount of that as well, and that's just been such a special thing to tune into. And yeah, just another aspect of it that's been so fun to tune in with is pollinator diversity is just such a huge indicator of just farm health as a whole. Bees just being so susceptible to changes in air quality, soil health, water health. Just the presence of these bees on the farm just can just show us so much about how we're doing a good job maintaining this as an ecosystem, as a wild place. And just every time that Sarah identifies a new bee here, it just shows how we're really supporting the farm as as a sanctuary for insects and as an ecosystem unto itself. So yeah, pass it to you, Sarah.
Yeah, that's a great point that you made of kind of not uh as a farmer, and most farmers, your primary job is to grow food and a specific crop. And it's hard enough with all of the um challenges that are being slung at farmers these days. I mean, in Southern Oregon, it's water issues and climate change and wildfire smoke and economic issues, and the list goes on. And so you have so much on your plate already to manage that. Taking on something extra, like thinking about your bees or understanding the insects on your farm, oftentimes is an afterthought of many farms and farmers. And of course, farms and farmers understand that bees are important because bees pollinate. But one of the really fun things about our work is I originally was a beekeeper and a bee researcher at the University of Montana in Missoula, and that's how I got into bees and beekeeping. But then throughout my career, I've also edged into native bee research and work, which is so fun because there are hundreds and hundreds of native bees, cousins to honeybees here in Oregon, and thousands across the United States. And so one of the fun things when Tommy and I did our first couple of walks together was there's so many bees on the farm, on all of our farms and in all of our backyards, that you wouldn't even know was a bee unless you knew it. Oftentimes they're mistaken for just um, well, yesterday I saw a digger bee that I'm sure people would have mistaken for a bumblebee because it's kind of big and bumbly and dark in color. But there's so much bee diversity out there. And sometimes people, yeah, they think it's a fly or a bumblebee when it might be a different kind of cool, rare, interesting, neat native bee. So and it's a really good indicator. The more bee diversity that you have on your farm is an indicator of the diversity of the ecosystem, because native bees have really unique nesting habits, whereas honeybees live inside hives, and a hive usually looks like a box or an old oak tree. Native bees, some of them live in twigs, some of them live in old logs that a woodpecker or worm has made a hole. Some of them make their own holes. Some of them live in 1 inch down in the soil. Some of them live in giant catacombs with lots of sisters down throughout the soil. And it can take years to build those catacombs of bee nests. So in order to have a diversity of bees on the farm, you have to have a diversity of nesting sites, which means just more ecological diversity and biodiversity on the farm. So I've been really, really excited about everything I'm seeing out on Banyan Farm because the diversity is pretty legit. And that really speaks to the health of the farm, which is, the data that I provide you with is gives you guys some cool bragging rights to share with your consumers as to what a good job you're doing, for sure. I mean, I've been out on farms and ranches that only have honeybees and no other bees, or maybe have honeybees and 1 to 2 very, very common species of bumblebees, and that's it. But we're already starting to see some pretty unique and rare diversity out there at Banyan.
And Sarah, from that joint project between Banyan Farm and B Corp organization, how are you thinking that you'll use those findings and all of that research?
They're really so the findings pretty much belong to Banyan Farm, and so I'm out there working as a partner to see what we can see, and I also share on social media whenever I come across something really cool or unique or interesting. We also I have an art project called Bee Habitat and Cyanotype, and I collect flowers from the different habitat projects that we're working on and create art with them. And it's just an interesting and cool way. And then I do exhibits and gallery showings. And so it's a cool way to kind of bring people in to understand more about our projects and understand more about bee habitat. But as far as the data itself, that really belongs to Banyan. And so they get to share it with their community how they like.
Very cool. It sounds like such a sweet synergy between the organizations of like Tommy's appreciation for the little nuances of getting to know the bees and what they mean. And then Sarah, it sounds like you have found some treasures out there as well.
Yeah, and for me too, just being present on the Banyan farm. And when we first walked in, one of my first questions, which is one of my first common questions for when I start working with a farm, is like, oh, can you give me a list of what you spray and when you spray it? And Tommy was like, oh, we don't spray anything. And I was like, what? You don't even spray like a little vinegar here and there to get rid of the weeds in the road? And he's like, no, we don't spray anything. And I was absolutely amazed because the majority of farms out there in the country spray something, and even organic farms and less so regenerative farms, they're trying to specifically work with nature to get away from using any kind of chemical inputs. But it's actually shocking how many pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides are approved for organic use. And so I was just absolutely amazed to find that they use 0 chemical inputs. And so I love sharing that with other farming partners, that it can be done. If you can create the amount of diversity, even on a small scale, even on a medium scale, on a large scale, you can really reduce or completely eliminate your reliance on chemical inputs.
That's awesome.
That's really
cool.
What?
Yeah. I was thinking it would be so fun to like, Sarah, for you to share a little bit about like what you actually do on the farm, because, well, and I wanted to speak a little bit about the research that Sarah gives back to us. So Sarah's been out at the Banyan Farm, and she creates a report for us with photos. I mean, it's probably a 10-page report reporting on the types of the bees, the native bees, where they're nesting. It's a gorgeous, detailed report. That we're just starting to digest. Like, how cool is it to have this information? But I love learning like what Sarah's actually doing out there. So, and I love learning that Sarah has like the coolest research van that she takes all over touring and going to different projects, including Banyan Farm. But will you just tell us like when you're going out next week, like what do you do? when you're there? Like, you drive your van out, you camp, what are you looking for, and how do you like measure it? And you're taking photos, like all the things. It's such an adventure.
Yeah. I had this vision in 2018 that we were currently at that time we were working on this really, really cool restoration project, and BGO was doing the bee monitoring portion of it, where we were studying bees on a 200-acre ranch that had was restored by the Nature Conservancy and the Oregon Department of Transportation to its original vernal pool glory, so a local native wetland. And it's still, and it was just absolutely amazing to learn what we were able to learn out there and see what we were able to see. And there's so many lessons that came for me on landscape management and bee habitat, and we worked out there for 5 years, and I was out there every week, once, 2 times, 3 times a week from April until October. So it was quite the experience for myself and my team. And I wanted to do that. Once that project started winding down, I just wanted to continue to do that, but be able to work shoulder to shoulder with farmers and ranchers all over to be able to do this work. And it's not something, all of the monitoring equipment and everything that I need isn't something that can just fit into a bin or a backpack. We have a full lab here in Ashland. And so I thought, well, I guess I just need to figure out a way to help my lab go mobile. And so I envisioned a camper van, but instead of the usual van life things like, I don't know, like hammocks and really cool culinary kitchens, I envisioned a bee lab and a soil health lab, because we also study soil inside this van. So that's what we did. The board was super supportive of it, and we looked and looked for a very long time and did a lot of fundraising and finally found the perfect van. And it's currently in our possession, and we'll be heading into research season 2 with it this year. Yeah, it's there's living quarters in the front and bee lab in the back. And so all the things that you need. So traps to trap bees, nets, microscope, reference collection, books and books and books and books, all the things. And then so basically for Banyan, what it looks like is I come out and I get there in the afternoon on day 1 and set up a couple of traps to be able to trap the bees for 24 hours, so I can understand what's there when I can't be there watching, because I can't be at 25 places at once around the farm. And then the next morning I get up, and then Tommy and I will work together to look at, with Banyan, you all want to know about specific herbs and specific flowers that are in your products and what bees are pollinating those. And so kind of what those win-wins are, like which bees are your herbs supporting in the ecosystem. And then also for your consumers, like it's kind of cool to know that, oh, a bumblebee or a digger bee or a honeybee or a sweat bee pollinated this herb that's inside this vitamin or this supplement that I take. And so I provide that information back through observation. And then the bees come out of the traps, and then they're sent to our taxonomist and research advisor, Sarah Gardner, who's up in Pendleton. And then she creates a extremely detailed list of bees for us down to species. So we know specifically the bee communities that are on the landscape. And we'll be working together with years to come. For years to come, we're heading into year 2 to be able to understand that as Tommy and I work together to provide more habitat and more specific habitat for the goals that Tommy has for the farm and that I would love to see for the bees, are we improving the bee communities overall as we go forward? So that is another reason for taking that data, is to understand the bee communities in the area, and are we able to support more bees through the habitat work that we're doing together. And then so that looks really different depending upon where I am in the world and what the research goals are. We have multiple different research projects going on right now. So that's Banyan. And then right before I get to Banyan next week, I'll be up in the Willamette Valley doing a similar study with Trisatum Vineyard, a partner that we're in year 4 with, studying bees and improving bee habitat together. And that's been an absolutely just a joy to work with that team and see all of the amazing things. I've been monitoring and helping support them through a transition from organic into regenerative agriculture, which in wine grape growing, there's a lot of really scary management transitions to happen, like no-till and cutting down on the mowing and increasing diversity and creating bee habitat within a vineyard, which are not pollinated by bees. And so we get a lot of questions about that, but we're definitely seeing the data as far as the wine complexity that having bees and having flowers within the vineyard makes a more interesting and complex and delicious wine. And then starting mid next month, I head to Montana and South Dakota, where I'll be studying bee communities in ecosystems that either are dominated by bison or have cattle on them, but the cattle ranchers are tolerant of predators. So I have this really cool and exciting research project going on where we're looking at 2 extremely large ranches with a lot of grazing rights who tolerate wolves and grizzly bears and actually graze and live alongside wolves and grizzly bears. And we're really curious as to what that ecosystem looks like for bees and bee health. And then we're also working with a group of 5 ranchers in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem to try and understand how we can get more bee habitat out on the range and how, if cattle can be a part of that, if we can feed specific good honey producing and good nectar and pollen producing plants to cows in their minerals and have them distribute them out onto the range and the landscape in order to repopulate the Montana rangelands and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem with flowers. So yeah, that's kind of our habitat projects in a nutshell, and where the van and the van lab will be cruising around to this summer.
It's really incredible, Sarah. And it sounds too that like there's so much on the ground work being done, but ultimately with a bigger vision in mind of education in so many different realms. It's really incredible. Thanks for sharing all that with us.
Yeah.
Now, there's a term that we've heard that's called pollinator pasture. I'm curious to know if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, bee pasture. So that's kind of like that's the basis of all of our work, is that we want to work with farmers and ranchers and wine grape growers to create bee pasture, which isn't a term that we coined. I think I originally read the phrase when I was rereading The Hobbit a few years ago. J.R.R. Tolkien actually talks about bee pasture. It's this really like beautiful and mystical portion of the book where he's talking about Gandalf coming to visit the hobbits and the Hobbit Shire, or wherever the hobbits live, and how like he can hear buzzing, the buzzing of the bees before he even gets to the Shire because of the bee pasture. And I just found that so amazing. I was like, oh, we just need to have bee pasture everywhere. Like this is what the world needs. And so bee pasture really is just flowers and lots of them. And I started working in regenerative, holistic management, regenerative agriculture in about 2015. And I would do farm tours and ranch tours to go and learn from farmers and ranchers that were practicing regenerative agriculture and adaptive grazing, rotational grazing. And they'd be so excited when I showed up because there's not a lot of bee people that are into this work. And so they'd be like, oh, bee girl's here. We can't wait to show you all the flowers that we have in our pasture. And we can't wait to, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Let's go see it. And we would get there and there'd be like in one clover, in like kind of one corner of the pasture, like some clover and then like a few dandelions and maybe some honeybees and maybe a couple bumblebees. But I was like, oh man, we can just do so much better than this. I think historically our ranges, our meadows, our prairies were extraordinarily dense with flowering forbs. And through open grazing and the way that we currently farm and through monoculture agriculture, we've just absolutely decimated that. And so I think that it's really important to bring bee pasture back. So basically just landscapes absolutely drenched in flowers and every square inch that we possibly can on agricultural properties. And my friend Mimi Castillo and I kind of coined a term together when we were actually hanging out in the van drinking coffee in a vineyard one morning, and of bee refugia. And wouldn't that be cool if agriculture could be a refugia for bees, and not only honeybees, but also native bees? How cool would that be if beekeepers, if there's so much forage and so many flowers in the landscape, to be able to support local beekeepers to produce honey for their local communities, and their local communities valued this honey and paid a good amount for it so these beekeepers could make a living wage? How cool would that be if beekeepers didn't have to be a cog in the wheel of industrial agriculture and constantly moving their bees down to almonds and around to different crops to pollinate, if they could just stay at home and make honey? And how cool would that be if we had ample native pollinators and native bees in our agricultural landscapes to be able to pollinate all of our foods without having to truck in semi-loads of honeybees? And as the climate changes and different natural areas dry up as well, how cool would that be if our agricultural landscapes could be a refuge for native bees to come and live on and thrive on and coexist with agriculture and coexist with honeybees? So kind of a rabbit hole there, but
Love it, Sarah.
good question. Beegirl.org. It's all on their website.
How do you envision like the idea of like, let's put the wildflowers everywhere, let's get the bees everywhere? How, like in the future of your vision, how does that impact the whole globe and the planet and the people on it as well?
I mean, right now we're in the 6th great mass extinction. So hopefully by recovering our floral diversity and our ecosystems and our pollinators, we can, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could stop losing thousands of living species a day or a week? I mean, we're in it right now. It's hard to see because we're all so busy and our lives are so detached from nature. But we're in a great extinction event right now. We're losing hundreds, if not thousands, of species during this week and this month. We will lose so many species. So restoring biodiversity through flowers to our landscapes, wouldn't that be cool if that was a key to slowing down this extinction period that we're currently in? Keeping it light.
It's important though, Sarah. It's super important that, I mean, just like having the light shed on where we're at is very important acknowledgement. And I know we all know there's a lot of challenges around climate work. So yeah, Aaron or Sarah or Tommy, if anyone wants to speak to this, just this idea of how, yes, we can collect lots of data and we can have lots of science-based information, but I know that this is true at the Banyan Farm. There's a lot of heart and soul and feeling involved in this work too. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, I could speak to that a bit. This is a Sarah quote, so I wanted to credit you on this, Sarah. But Sarah just mentioned the first time we were out here that agriculture is both it's really both the problem and a potential solution to this idea of bee extinction and general like population decline of just tons of different kinds of species. Obviously, agriculture is responsible for just so much toxicity that gets churned out into the environment through the use of pesticides and herbicides generally. And yeah, that's just like just a component of conventional agriculture. But also just seeing that like farms that aren't engaging in those practices can really be a sanctuary, that we can really be stewards of the environment and can be creating a place for wildlife, for bees, for plant diversity. And it's just so easy, to feel so discouraged about so many this the state of affairs, and just knowing that we have an opportunity to be part of a solution, even in a small way, has been just really encouraging. Just in the work that we're doing, growing a variety of plants, can really be having an impact on the wild spaces around us. Just gives me a bit more pep in my step every day.
Love that. I love that. Well, thank you, Tommy. I can speak to the challenge of climate work from, inside the 4 Banyan walls in the office space, and what does environmental responsibility look like? And generally the narrative is measure everything and then offset. But what the challenge with that is, from my perspective, is it's incredibly difficult to measure. And they first say, you can't fix what you don't first measure. Scope 1 and 2 is quite easy to measure, but scope 3 at the farm level, it's extremely difficult to measure all of the ingredients coming around the world from Banyan at various different farms. And it can be absolutely totally overwhelming and almost paralyzing. And the good news is, through collaborations, even with other B Corps and the Sustainable Herbs Project, we're making some progress with joint collaboration on measuring scope 3 emissions through some of our shared suppliers, which is incredible. So that's great, but it takes so much time. And what keeps me up at night is, thinking about, like Sarah says, the great mass extinction, and what can we do, and how can we use our one precious life to make a difference. And so that's why I think that projects like this, and with Sarah, with B Girl, and other nonprofits doing great work in the space, in the environmental responsibility space, is so important, that you have to do both. You cannot just sit and wait until you measure, because it's always an estimate anyway, and it's just a number. But we have to drop into our hearts, and we have to say, what can we do now? What can we do locally? What can we do locally? What can we do with local partners? What can we do in our own yards? I have a pollinator garden right out here, and that's not too hard. There's lots of resources you can call on to do that. But there's a lot we can do. And what we're looking at is, we're considering this partnership with Sarah, this long-term partnership, is really an inset project versus just buying offsets out in the marketplace for, say, for example, a random solar project in Idaho that we're not connected to. We're really looking at the land that we are connecting to, and how to build this nature positive business, where we are building up nature, building up biodiversity, while we're attempting to measure. But we can't wait just for the measurements before we take action. So I think that's some advice I have on World Bee Day. Like, let's think about, what can we do now? And if you have any connection to land, totally consider doing some research projects with Sarah. But Sarah, I think, also has some tips on what we can all do. But this for me, from my perspective, has been such a beautiful win-win, love, like so many ways, for the bees, for Banyan, for B Corps, for Tommy at the farm and the crew there. I think all of this work has brought such deeper purpose to our day-to-day, and deeper meaning. And I love what you said, Sarah. I'm just visualizing a world drenched in flowers. I'm like, that is the world I want to imagine. And even the farm drenched in flowers, even more so than it is now, over the course of our work together. Just to even capture the images of that farm drenched in flowers, I think, is a beautiful sight to visualize. Yeah. So I'm just so grateful for this beautiful partnership. And together we're stronger, right? It's just so much more fun and collaboration.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think you nailed it when you talked about like, oh, I just have a pollinator in my backyard. And oftentimes, we all experience, I think, probably the majority of people in America and the world are experiencing climate grief. And at the same time, it's so existential. It's like, it's so out there. Like, what can I do? I have to drive my car to go to work. I don't know how to get coal-fired power plants to stop emitting carbon. I don't know how to do that. And so, but something that you can do is plant flowers. That's like the one, and especially, World Bee Day today, May 20th, is the perfect day. It's a Saturday. It's a perfect day to go out and plant flowers. And just an example of data that we took, and something that Banyan can potentially do with it, is that this is a picture of a bumblebee on echinacea out at the Banyan Farm. And we found through our through observation that echinacea was the most beneficial flower to bees on the farm, which is exciting. And it's also a perennial, so it's drawing down carbon. And so maybe what they'll do with that data is just plant more echinacea, and not only for the good of to share it with their consumers, but also to just create more habitat on the farm. So there's another win-win. And you can also, echinacea is a native plant to North America. It grows wild all over the place. I saw it in South Dakota last summer. And so it's fairly easy to grow. So that's something you can grow. My other favorites to grow that benefit are native bees, as well as our honeybees, are sunflowers and Phacelia and cosmos. So those are some of my favorites that are super easy to grow and support a lot of different bees. And so that can be your thing that you go do today to celebrate World Bee Day, and then to also be part of the climate solution, is just plant flowers. And climate work doesn't have to be heavy. It can be light and joyful and bright and full of color.
Love that encouragement, Sarah. I feel inspired to go do it right after this. Can you tell us a little bit, Sarah, about how we can support Bee Girl organization too?
Yes. Yeah, we're a very small grassroots environmental organization, which environmental organizations only receive 5% of annual giving. And so we need every little drop that we can get. Women-led environmental organizations get something like 0.02% of national funding. So we're always in need of partners and funding partners. And so bgirl.org/donate is how you support us. And you can also go to bgirl.org/helpthebees if you'd like to that flower list again, or to find any other ways that you can partner up with us. So, and we love working with B Corps. We love working with other organizations that have the same mindset and ethics as we do. And B Corp certification is so rigorous. We feel like the job is already done. And so we always look for that label when someone reaches out to us for cause marketing or other sorts of partnerships. So
I'm visualizing a bunch of B Corps getting together and saying, how can we collaborate and do something really cool together with Sarah and World Bee Day. So if anyone has ideas out there, if you're a B Corp, reach out to me. Erin D at banyanbotanicals.com. We got so many friends doing great work, and I think it's so fun to collaborate. But we definitely highly recommend working with Sarah if you can. And Sarah, you're a 1% for the Planet partner.
Yes. So yeah. We love working with 1%, and we love those partnerships.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you all for joining. Tommy, Sarah, Erin, Banyan Botanicals, Banyan Farm, and Bee Girl. What a combination.
All the bees, the beekeepers, the bee labs. We got 2 bee labs. We got B Corp Bee Lab. We got Sarah's Bee Lab in the van. We got beekeepers. We got the beehives.
Yeah, so beautiful. And thank you so much to B Lab for hosting us and for, just getting us all together for this fruitful conversation.
And let's visualize the world drenched in flowers.
I love it.
It's so pretty. More echinacea.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
all.
having me.
Good chatting with you.
Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Happy B Day.